Welcome to the recording of the webinar titled What the New Vegetation Management Laws Mean for Managing Mulga in South West Queensland. This webinar was presented on the 16th of July by Seamus Batstone from the Department of Natural Resources, Mines and Energy. This is part 6 in a series of short recordings from this webinar and is titled Information on Compliance, Monitoring and Imagery.
We'll touch on compliance and monitoring because I know a lot of people are interested in this. Probably everyone's heard about the early detection system by now. That's one of the tools that we use. It's based on Landsat imagery, which comes out every 16 days, and a comparison is made between the image that we get and the image 16 days prior to see where clearings occurred. A bunch of people go through that and look for if there's spotter notifications, permits, things like that over those areas. If they can't find anything like that, and it's pretty obviously clearing, then they'll get in contact with that person. A lot of people just get a letter saying, we noticed some clearings occurred, just check that you're following the laws. Some people get a follow-up phone call. Fairly bad cases, there might be a site inspection and something like a restoration notice or even a penalty infringement notice issued. If it's really disastrous, it might be a bit more serious, but that's very rare. I saw the latest early detection system stuff came out yesterday. There was only about 4 notifications for the state. So it's, the numbers are really dropping on the amount of clearing that's being done that's outside of the scope of permits or self-assessment or exemptions. We're really getting a lot less of that now. We do audits from time to time. I think our target is around 30 for this coming year. They're generally fairly random, although we do, if something looks a bit dodgy from the satellite imagery, we'll often audit that. We might be sort of talking to a landholder about, well, you've got to, widen the strips that you keep a little bit and narrow the strips that you're harvesting a little bit. That's the kind of conversations that we have often during an audit. But the bulk of our audits so far have all come up fine. They've been random just based on notifications, and the bulk of our audits come up fine. There's also the SLATs, which you're probably all aware of as well, which is the annual state land cover and tree study. The interesting thing about that one is that the minister was out here last week and he was talking about that they're now going to start measuring regrowth vegetation. So they're going to start measuring how much vegetation is actually regrowing. I don't know if you remember, but there was a few questions asked, particularly by AgForce, about, well, are measuring how many trees are growing back? The answer was, we don't know how many trees are growing back. And so there's been a specific project now that SLATs will include that data from now on. So that'll be very interesting to see that next year and what sort of figures come up. Information provided by members of the community. So that's the top one there. And realistically, that seems to be the ones that are getting investigated a lot now. Is we get calls. It's particularly coastal. We don't get. It only makes up something like 2% of the phone calls to the hub, but often people will go to an office and complain or write a letter because someone's clearing trees near their property at Noosa or something like that. So you'll find that there's a lot of that going on. Early detection system. I've kind of gone through that 16-day cycle. We see all the clearing. It gets filtered, explained or unexplained. You may get a phone call if you come up on that. That's what we see when we're looking at it. The shapefile is automatically generated, and when we look at it, we see that sort of progression of clearing. Fairly easy to see. And then we've got the Planet Labs imagery, which comes out every day, where we can focus in a little bit more on it to see what's going on. So there's a lot of publicly available imagery. You'll find links to a lot of this stuff on the information sent. There's a whole range of different resolutions. In that top right-hand picture, you can actually see the bulldozer pushing up the trees. That's probably Earth Eye. I'd say the other one's spot imagery, and then there's an old air photo there. So compliance tools, there's a range of methods. We use to monitor vegetation management activities. Low priority stuff, little areas that don't quite, they're probably a little bit wider than a exemption or something like that. You'll get a map and an educational letter. Something a bit worse, you'll get a phone call and maybe a warning letter. High priority, there'll be further investigation. Someone will probably come out there. Court action, absolutely a last resort. It's normally for people that won't stop once they've been told, what you're doing is not legal, and they sort of thumb their nose and say, well, I'm going to do it anyway. Basically, in those cases, you sort of have to take people to court to make them stop. So who's responsible for clearing? Landholders and contractors share responsibility. Landholders have got to keep an eye on what the contractors are up to. It's not really, if someone clears a bunch of country on your place, you sort of can't walk away and say, well, there was a naughty contractor that did all that. you'll share some responsibility with them over that. So landholders should provide contractors with a copy of the authorisation. So if you've done your fodder notification, a copy of that notification and the map, keep records of clearing activities, keep an eye on what's going on. Contractors can also be held liable. So where, the landholder says, yes, I've got all the authorisations to do that, the contractor really needs to cite that sort of stuff.
Thank you for watching this part of the recording of the webinar of what the new vegetation management laws mean for managing mulga in South West Queensland, which was recorded on the 16th of July 2018.